gay, had sent misogynistic slurs. Coach Steve Nash had, oh, I guess we got the sound right now. Go ahead with the sound.
I'm sorry that people seen that language I use. That's not really what I want people to see and hear from me. But hopefully I can move past it and get back out on the floor.
Okay, what I was saying before we got the sound was that Coach Steve Nash did address this with him, with the team, et cetera. And obviously that was KD addressing the situation for the first time. Stephen A., how do you think the NBA should handle this?
I think they should fine him and move on. It's unfortunate that Michael Rappaport would reveal those text messages. He should not have done that. That private DM from Kevin Durant. He should not have done that. That was the wrong thing to do. And in the interest of full disclosures, Max Kellerman, Molly, I've had private conversations and back and forths with numerous players. Two of them have been Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving in the past. You've never heard me utter it, and I wouldn't without their permission. I wouldn't do that. It's a private matter, and that's not what you do. And so that's a code that Michael Rappaport violated, and I think it's important to say that. Having said all of that, I also think that Kevin Durant was going directly at Michael Rappaport. You can't use that language. You shouldn't use that language. And the league needs to send a message by simply fining him to make that point. But let's not make it more than it is. Even though you're going to have folks in the gay community that will look at it as anti-gay and stuff like that and personalizing it. No, Kevin Durant was going at Michael Rappaport because obviously they've communicated in the past. And, he felt like Michael Rappaport shouldn't have been saying some things. And so they were going at, it was a personal argument between themselves. To try to generalize this, like Kevin Durant was being anti-gay or anything like that, I think is going a step too far because I do not believe for 1 second that that was his intent. And I don't think that he should be bothered with all of that. But that doesn't mean the commissioner is going to feel that way. And it doesn't mean the commissioner is going to feel that way based on the evidence that security brings to Byron Spruill, who runs operations for the NBA. And when he commiserates with Commissioner Adam Silver, who knows what conclusion they will come to. And I know it's going to go up because I know this is going to come up because I know this league. When Donald Sterling was exiled from the NBA, banned from the NBA by Adam Silver, that was based off of a private conversation that he was having with his mistress that she secretly taped. And Adam Silver said, quote, well, it's public now. It's public now. So because no matter how private the conversation may have been, why do you have to be around black people? What is that about? What do you get out of being around black people? No, Kevin Durant was talking to Michael Rappaport. He wasn't talking about anybody else, any group of people or anybody else. He was talking directly to Michael Rappaport. So I do think they're two completely different situations. But make no mistake about it, there's going to be other owners and league executives that say, well, you did this to Donald Sterling for this reason. What you going to do to this guy? Why are you not going to do anything? Is it because he's a player? That's what I'm fearful of. But I hope that the NBA commissioner and the league office would think better than taking this further than a fine, because it's a personal argument, and I think they should leave it at that. And I don't think any more of it should be made, any more noise should be made about it. That's my personal opinion. Leave Kevin Durant alone after the fine.
Yeah, he has to be punished. I agree, it's probably a fine for two reasons. One, it's for the anti-gay remarks, even though he didn't intend, it doesn't seem to me, to mean it as anti-gay. He meant it more generally as an insult. The way he was using the language seemed to me to say, you're kissing someone's butt, right? You're kissing up to them. But he used language that was anti-gay. And the problem is, not just when he says, I wish people wouldn't have heard me use that, or know that I used that language, or heard the language that I used. It's that when you do that, implicit in that remark is there's something wrong with that. So a lot of people who are gay, and just people who empathize with other people, say, well, wait a minute. That feels bad for other people to hear. But that's why I think KD is saying I don't want anyone else to hear it. Whatever I'm directing in my private life, I did not mean for that to be public. And we all know that we have different behavior and even sometimes language in private than in public. We don't curse generally in public as much as we would do in private or use bad language, that kind of stuff. But the other thing is that he made a threat. You can't threaten somebody, and especially put it in writing. Now, I understand why KD wouldn't expect to be exposed that way, because he's like, wait a minute, that's a DM. That's between me and you.
Yeah.
And now you're going to put me out on Front Street. Apparently, KD and Michael Rappaport have a relationship off Front Street.
They do.
Right?
They did.
Or they did, right. And that's why maybe KD got mad in the first place. Like, if you hang out with somebody, if you know someone a little bit, and then they're publicly criticizing you, you're like, wait, time out. Why are you publicly getting on social media and saying stuff about me if we're hanging out in private, right? Like, I figured that was, like, we're past that kind of thing, or you wouldn't do that. The other thing I want to say about KD, so I do think he should be punished. I think it's a fine, is in a way, he seems thin-skinned, right? Like, stuff really bothers him. He's had burner accounts. He gets into it with fans on social media, or has in the past. And you're like, KD, what's that about? What is it, some kind of insecurity? But there's another way to look at that from KD, and that's he does care what people think because he respects other people. In a way, you would think, well, how does that make any sense? Well, why are you getting into it with a fan, KD? That's just some anonymous fan.
What I will say that a lot of people feel like he's not respecting them, like he's so thin-skinned at times that he comes across as a bit truculent, a bit acerbic, and
what I'm saying is, yes,
that's what they say about him.
And what I'm saying is, there's a way to
saying about him now.
What I'm saying is, there's a way to see it in the opposite way. Like, KD, why are you getting into it with a fan, some anonymous fan on social media? Boy, you're really sensitive. Another way to look at it is, actually, just because that's an anonymous fan, he doesn't think of them as any less of a person than if some famous person, like Michael Rappaport or someone else, says something. He treats people like people. Even a fan on social media, it matters to him, and he expects to be treated the same way.
I love the fact, Max, that he speaks his mind. You know, I've always respected the hell out of KD from the standpoint that he's real and true to himself in terms of his feelings, and he doesn't mind expressing himself. Yep. There's a couple of times that we've gotten the back and forth, and I had to stand down and go like this. He got me there. He's right about that. I was wrong about that. You know, when we've just communicated privately amongst ourselves. He's made some very, very valid points. He's a highly intelligent brother. He expresses himself, and I have no problem with it. The problem is, though, you know, he sometimes acts like you don't have a right to assume based on the evidence that you're confronted with. It's like if you're not getting something out of thin air, like, for example, you might call him thin-skinned, right? You just did, okay? He'd be offended by that, and at least if the past has been indicative of that, he'd be offended by something like that. When you're saying there's a mountain of evidence.
If you get offended by being called thin-skinned, it proves the point.
But there's a mountain of evidence that shows that you have reasons for saying what you said, and he might want you to shove all of that aside because he firmly believes otherwise. That's the kind of stuff that he encounters himself with. And when they call LeBron James the king, one of the reasons they call LeBron James the king is because he's a champion 4 times over. Another reason they call LeBron James the king is because he handles himself and his business in such an adult and man-like fashion that it does make other people look a little bit bad at times.
I get that point, too. One thing that strikes me about KD is he's been caught with burner accounts, right? And what that tells me is KD is living in a world where he has certain things he wants to say, but he's not allowed. That's why you have a burner account, right? And here again, he's caught saying things like, this is how I talk in private, or to someone I know who I'm mad at. The person that KD is seems to be someone who's chafing against the fact that he's not really allowed to be himself in public.
Before we move on, let me say this. Years ago, Charles Barkley showed up at a press conference with all of us NBA reporters because he was joking around about something, and I forget what it was, and it was deemed inappropriate, and they made national news over it or whatever. Charles Barkley walked into a press conference for the NBA and cussed out everybody, and said, now, what the hell is your question?
Right.
And everybody was silent because they took it out of context and they tried to castigate him for no good reason. So what I'm saying is the level of bravery that Barkley has, particularly if you're in Kevin Durant's position, you say he can't say something. No, Max, it's that you choose to want to say something, but not absorb
Not everyone.
the shrapnel that comes with it. Charles Barkley is somebody that doesn't care and strong enough not to care. I might be another one of those people. Several other people might be another one of those people. If you're an athlete, it's not that you can't. It's that you might not be brave enough to deal with the fallout from it.
Not everyone can be Charles Barkley.
He's not going to lose his job.
I don't think we could. I don't think we could have a world where everyone was Charles Barkley.
I understand
it takes all kinds. And Charles Barkley, Kevin Durant, KD here, if he reacts the way he did, proves the charge that he is being thin-skinned.
But if you're not worried about losing your job, and you know you're going to still get your money, what you worried about? You say what you mean. You mean what you say and you move on.
At the end of the day, guys, the older I get, the less people I want to deal with. I don't know how people have the same phone number since high school. If I could, I'd change my phone number every 6 months. Life is hard enough. You only want people in your life that actually add to it and to deal with all that nonsense. And at this point, it's like, who cares what people think? People are going to talk about you regardless of what you do. People are going to judge you as perfect as you try to be.
Hey, Molly, you brought up the other day.
Molly, I used to live like that, trying to be a people pleaser and worry about what everybody thinks. It's like
that's where I'm going.
Who gives a damn?
Remember what you brought up the other day? You remember what you brought up the other day when you said you started working here and you received from some advice from Skip Bayless, but then you forgot to mention the part when you came to me. And you said to me, how do you deal with it one time? And I said to you, Molly, only thing I ask is, did they spell my name right? It's with a PH, not a V. Other than them, they could kick rocks. I can give a damn what they say.
Well, we saw
That's
this.
what I told you.
We saw this
back in 2015, and I still mean it that way today.
We saw this, and I wasn't on the show when you responded to Russell Westbrook, right? I wasn't, but we saw it then too. And Westbrook's point was, you're not just going to control the narrative. All we're doing, or all people are going to have their thoughts. They're entitled to their own thoughts, and if they make them public, so long as they, as long as they have the ability to do so, and now with social media, everyone does, they can do that too. And Westbrook, Durant, and no one else can control in a free country what people think and say about them.
Well, I say bump the narrative. We all make mistakes. We're all imperfect, and just try your best. That's all I got to say about it. By the way, we did ask everybody at home what they think in terms of if KD should be punished, and 62% said no. So the majority are saying no, he should not. We'll see what happens. We'll keep you all up to speed on what happens. Guys, more NBA to dive into. Let's go to the Nuggets. Last night, defeating the Clippers 101-94 last night in a game in which the Nuggets led the entire way. Paul George contributed 17 points, 8 rebounds after missing the previous 2 games with a sore right foot. Max, do you think Paul George is going to be under more pressure than anybody in these Western